You are paying $8,400 for your brother's restaurant debt today. That was the first thing Mason said when I answered the phone, as if my name were a line of credit and not a person standing in the seafood aisle with two paper bags cutting red marks into my fingers. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. Around me, the market in Seattle glittered with crushed ice, silver fish, and yellow light. A clerk was calling out the fresh catch of the day. Somewhere behind me, a child was begging for candy near the checkout. Everything looked so ordinary that my mind rejected the ugliness of his voice on instinct. Then my father's message landed. If you let your brother get buried before Christmas, do not bother coming home. A breath later, my mother's text followed, softer in tone and somehow sharper for it. After all we gave you, this is when family should matter most. I stood very still. The cold from the seafood counter climbed through my coat sleeves, but what spread through my chest was not cold. It was recognition. Exhausted, old, familiar recognition. The kind that arrives when a song you hate starts playing and you already know every word. Mason had always been the beautiful emergency in our family. At 31, he still moved through life like consequence was something that happened to slower people. He was charming, restless, full of big ideas and unfinished plans. Our parents called that ambition. They called me reliable. In the Hayes family, reliable never meant respected. It meant available. Useful. Expensive. When Mason wanted money for a food truck concept that lasted less than one summer, I was told to help because he was building his future. When he fell behind on his car payments, I covered them because he was under stress. When he burned through a marketing loan for his new Portland restaurant, my mother cried and said one strong push from me could change his life. One strong push. Then one more. Then another. I could have laughed if it had not been so tired. I am 35 years old. I work in compliance. My job is to study risk, trace weak points, and see disaster before other people admit it exists. And yet for years I had walked straight into the oldest trap in my life with my eyes open, because it wore the face of family and spoke in the voice of duty. My phone buzzed again. Mason this time. I already told the supplier you would handle it, he snapped. Do not make me look stupid. That sentence changed everything. Not help me. Not can you save me. Handle it. As if the decision had already been made in some private room where my parents had spent years appointing me the silent financier of my brother's chaos. I looked down at the salmon in my basket, the loaf of bread, the tiny carton of cream I had bought to make myself one decent dinner after a brutal week. Just yesterday I had wired the final deposit for my townhouse in Seattle. For the first time in my adult life, my money had a destination that was not a family fire. It had walls. Windows. A front door with my name on it. A life I had built inch by inch while everyone else called my restraint cold. My best friend Chloe would later say that moment was the real beginning, not when Mason called, not when my father threatened me, but when I realized they were not asking for love. They were transferring liability. I set the basket down on the metal edge of the counter and inhaled once, slow and deep. Around me, strangers went on comparing prices, choosing oysters, living clean little lives untouched by the war breaking open inside my phone. My mother was probably already wounded and weeping. My father was likely pacing with righteous anger, convincing himself authority made him right. Mason was somewhere in Portland burning through panic and pride at the same speed. They all expected me to fold. I had always folded before. That was the foundation under everything. This time, I opened the family group chat, watched the cursor blink like a small steady pulse, and typed 2 words. Not happening. I did not know yet that those words would tear the mask off my family before Christmas dinner. I only knew that for the first time in years, my hands were shaking not from fear, but from power. I woke the next morning to 12 missed calls, 1 voicemail from my father, and a text from my mother that simply read, "Call us before you make this worse." The apartment was still dark, washed in the thin blue light that comes before sunrise in Seattle. For a few seconds, I stayed under the blanket and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. That silence felt fragile, almost sacred, because I already knew the moment I reached for my phone, my family would come crashing through it like a storm through glass. I played my father's voicemail once. His voice began calm, the way men speak when they want to sound reasonable before they become cruel. "Natalie, answer your phone. Your brother is under enough pressure. We are not doing this today." Then the mask slipped. "You will fix this." I let the message end, saved it, and set the phone face down on my nightstand. I should say something important here. I was not broke. I was not heartless. I could have paid the $8,400. That was exactly why they had chosen me. Not because it was fair. Because it was possible. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed, hair pinned back, coffee in hand, walking into my office downtown like any other Thursday. That was the strangest part of family betrayal. The world never pauses for it. Elevators still rise. Keycards still beep. People still ask whether you saw the latest email. Meanwhile, inside your ribs, an entire history is rearranging itself into something colder and clearer. I work as a senior compliance manager for a logistics firm, which means I spend my days studying exposure, liability, patterns of misrepresentation, and the exact point where a bad decision turns into a legal problem. Around 10:30, while reviewing a vendor contract, I felt the truth settle inside me with almost insulting simplicity. My family was not asking for generosity. They were trying to transfer risk. The moment that thought formed, Mason called from a number I did not know. I answered because I wanted to hear what desperation sounded like when it was dressed as entitlement. "What is wrong with you?" he snapped. "I told Ethan the money was coming. He is waiting on your confirmation." I leaned back in my chair and kept my voice flat. "Why would you tell anyone I was paying your debt without asking me first? Because you obviously were going to," he shot back. "Dad said you would. Mom said you owed us. Stop making this dramatic and just send it." Owed us. Those two words slid across my skin like a blade. Not owed him. Owed us. As if the whole family had become a board of directors and I was the account they intended to liquidate. I asked the question carefully. "Did you sign anything with my name on it?" There was the smallest pause. Tiny. But real. The kind of pause that opens a trapdoor beneath a conversation. "No," he said too quickly. "Then why is the supplier waiting for my confirmation?" He exhaled hard. "Because I told him my sister handles the financial side when things get tight. It is not a big deal unless you make it one." There it was. Not an apology. Not even embarrassment. Just annoyance that I was refusing my assigned role in the lie. Less than an hour later, my office line rang. A man introduced himself as Ethan Cole from Cascade Commercial Kitchen Supply in Portland. His tone was professional, clipped, tired in the way people sound when they have already given more chances than they meant to. "Ms. Hayes, I am calling regarding the balance on an equipment account for Mason Hayes Culinary. We were told you would be personally guaranteeing the remaining amount and authorizing payment today." Every sound in the room seemed to recede. The keyboard clicks outside my glass office. The muted ring of another desk phone. Even my own breathing. I said each word slowly. "I am not guaranteeing anything. I never authorized my name to be used, and I am not paying this debt." A silence followed. Then Ethan spoke again, more carefully now. "To be clear, your name and work email appear on the supporting guarantor form we received last night." Something inside me went completely still. "Please send me every document connected to that form," I said. 5 minutes later, the email arrived. Mason had not just lied. He had entered my full name, my work email, and a crude digital signature that looked disturbingly close to mine. For one disorienting second, I simply stared at the screen, my coffee cooling beside me, my own last name glowing back at me from a promise I had never made. I should have panicked. Instead, I smiled. Because the story had changed. This was no longer a family disagreement. No longer a guilt-soaked fight about loyalty, sacrifice, or who owed what to whom. This was paperwork. Evidence. Fraud wearing the lazy perfume of family privilege. I forwarded the email to my personal account, saved every attachment, and created a folder named Hayes. Then I wrote back to Ethan in crisp, unmistakable language. I stated that I had not signed, authorized, or agreed to any guarantor obligation. I disputed the validity of the form. I requested written confirmation that my name would be removed from the file immediately. When I hit send, my pulse steadied. For years, my family had survived by dragging everything into the swamp of emotion, where truth blurred and guilt did all the heavy lifting. But facts lived on firmer ground. And for the first time, I was not standing in their storm. I was standing on evidence. By Friday morning, the lie had stopped sounding like a family argument and started sounding like a door slamming shut. I was at my desk in Seattle, halfway through a compliance review, when Ethan Cole called again. His voice had changed. The cautious neutrality was gone. What remained was the crisp restraint of a man who had spent the night comparing signatures, timestamps, and payment histories, and had arrived at a conclusion he did not enjoy but no longer doubted. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for your written clarification," he said. "We reviewed the guarantor submission and confirmed that your authorization was not valid. Based on the information we now have, the account will be escalated immediately." For a moment, I said nothing. Outside my office, someone laughed near the copier. A chair rolled across the floor. The ordinary world kept moving, blind and efficient, while one sentence quietly cracked open the future my family had been counting on. "What happens now?" I asked. Ethan answered carefully. "Without an enforceable guarantor and with the outstanding balance unresolved, the company would suspend any further accommodation." Several pieces of commercial kitchen equipment installed in Mason's restaurant were still under conditional release. If the debt remained unpaid, they could be repossessed. His words were calm, almost gentle, but I could hear the real meaning underneath them. No stove line. No prep refrigeration. No illusion of momentum. Mason's grand little empire in Portland was about to discover what happens when fantasy collides with invoices. I thanked him, ended the call, and stared at the reflection of my own face in the dark edge of my monitor. I did not feel triumph. Not yet. What I felt was sharper precision. The kind that comes when the truth finally steps out of the shadows and stops asking permission to exist. 20 minutes later, my father called. I answered on the second ring. "What did you do, Natalie?" he shouted, skipping hello, skipping breath, skipping every performance of decency he usually put on before a demand. "They are pulling the equipment. Ethan says Mason misrepresented the guarantor." "Why would you tell them that?" "Because it was true," I said. In the background, I could hear movement, a chair scraping hard across a floor, my mother crying somewhere farther away, and Mason's voice, hot and jagged, cutting through the noise like broken glass. For one chaotic second, I pictured the whole scene as if I were standing in the room with them. My father pacing in red-faced outrage. My mother pressing trembling fingers to her temple. Mason exploding at everyone except the person in the mirror. "You could have handled this privately," my father snapped. "No, Dad," I said. "Mason made it legal the moment he used my name." That silenced him for half a heartbeat. Then came the old strategy, dragged out like a family heirloom polished by use. "Families help each other, Natalie. Your brother is under pressure. If you had just paid the balance, none of this would be happening." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so naked. There it was again. The same rotten equation they had built my whole life on. If I absorbed the damage, peace was restored. If I refused, I was the cause of the explosion. Never the lie. Never the manipulation. Never the theft of my name. Only my refusal to keep bleeding quietly. By noon, my phone was full of messages. My mother texted that I was ruining Christmas. Mason left a voicemail so furious he could barely stay coherent. "You always do this, Natalie. You always act superior when other people are struggling." He was breathing hard, voice cracking with rage and panic. "If the restaurant closes, it is on you. On me. Not on the man who forged my involvement. Not on the months of unpaid invoices. Not on the showy opening parties, the imported tile bar front, the expensive branding campaign, the chef coats embroidered before payroll was stable. On me." Then the public game began. My mother posted on Facebook just after lunch. "Some children forget who stood beside them when they had nothing. Success can make people cold." The comments rolled in fast. Sad face emojis. Vague sympathy. People who knew nothing offering moral outrage like spare change. I did not respond. Silence is unbearable to manipulative people. They rush to fill it, and when they do, they reveal more than they mean to. An hour later, my cousin Rachel commented beneath my mother's post. "Did you also mention Mason used Natalie's name on debt paperwork, or are we pretending details do not matter now?" I stared at the screen, then let out one short breath that might have been a laugh. The post vanished within 15 minutes. By late afternoon, the cracks were widening everywhere. A former hostess from Mason's restaurant sent me a private message after hearing the story through relatives. She wrote that suppliers had been calling for weeks. That Mason kept assuring everyone his sister would step in. That he said it casually, confidently, like it was not even a gamble. Like it was policy. That message did something to me. It took this out of the realm of family distortion and set it under a harsher light. This had not been one desperate mistake made in a single panicked night. This had been a business model. A private mythology Mason had been spending in pieces long before I ever saw the bill. I forwarded everything to my Aunt Carol, the only person in the family who still asked questions before choosing a side. She called me 10 minutes later. Her voice was low, steady, and utterly without drama. "Do not let them rewrite this, sweetheart. They are not upset because you hurt him. They are upset because, for once, you did not rescue him." I closed my office door after that and stood there with my hand still wrapped around the phone. Outside, rain moved against the windows in thin silver lines. Cars slid through the gray Seattle afternoon. Inside my chest, something old was breaking apart, but something stronger was taking its place. That evening, I made a decision that would have terrified the version of me they were used to. I was going home for Christmas. Not to apologize. Not to keep the peace. Not to play the role of the dependable daughter dragged in to mop up another disaster. I was going with documents in my bag and the truth in my hands. And this time, when they looked at me across the table, they were not going to see the sister they could pressure. They were going to see the woman they had underestimated for far too long. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway in Tacoma on Christmas Eve, the sky had already gone the color of bruised steel. The house looked exactly the way it always had in December. Warm yellow light in the windows. A wreath on the door. Garland curling around the porch rail. From the outside, it still knew how to pretend. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon, roasted meat, and tension so thick it felt almost visible. I stepped in carrying a bakery box and my leather bag. My mother appeared first from the hallway, her face swollen from crying, lips pressed tight as if kindness itself had become too expensive to offer me. My father stood near the dining room entrance with his shoulders squared and jaw locked, a man trying to hold authority together by force of posture alone. Mason was sprawled on the living room sofa in borrowed sweats, one ankle bouncing hard, his phone clutched in his hand like he might still find some way to text himself out of disgrace. No one said welcome. My father did not ask how the drive was. He only looked at the bag on my shoulder, then at my face. "We need to talk," he said. I closed the door carefully behind me. "So do I." That answer landed harder than I expected. For a flicker of a second, something unsettled moved through the room. They were used to me arriving softened by guilt, ready to smooth edges, ready to be reasonable before anyone else had earned reason. They were not used to calm. Not this kind. Calm with a spine. We went into the dining room before the food even reached the table. The Christmas candles were already lit. The plates were set. Silverware gleamed beneath the chandelier. Everything was dressed for celebration, but the room itself felt like a courtroom that had borrowed holiday decorations. My father shut the door. "You could have ended this quietly, Natalie," he said. "Instead, you humiliated your brother and dragged outsiders into family business." I set the bakery box on a sideboard. Then I opened my bag, took out the printed guarantor form, and laid it flat on the table between us. "Quietly before or after Mason used my name on debt paperwork?" My mother's eyes flinched toward the page. Mason looked away first. I kept going. "Quietly before or after you posted about me online, Mom? Quietly before or after you told me not to come home if I did not pay, Dad?" My mother pressed trembling fingertips to her chest. "Honey, this got out of hand. No one wanted to hurt you." That almost would have worked on the old version of me. The old Natalie would have heard the crack in her voice and rushed in to comfort her. But I had spent too many years confusing tears with innocence. "You wanted to corner me," I said. "You just did not expect paperwork to answer back." Mason shot up from his chair so fast the leg scraped hard against the floor. "Oh my God, can you stop acting like you are the victim?" I was trying to save my restaurant. I turned to him. "With my name?" His face flushed dark. I was desperate. For one heartbeat, the room changed. There it was. The first honest thing he had said. Desperation. Fear. The terror of watching his invented success rot from the inside. I saw it pass through him like a crack of lightning, and for that one heartbeat I almost felt sorry for him. Then he ruined it. "And anyway, you owe me," he snapped. Silence dropped over the room. I stared at him. "I owe you?" My father moved too quickly, stepping in before Mason could explain, and that told me more than any confession would have. He did not want the logic spoken aloud because once spoken, it would sound exactly as rotten as it was. "Your brother took risks," he said, voice tight. "You were always the stable one. Families lean on the person who can carry more. Mason has different gifts." Different gifts. I let those words hang between us long enough to become absurd. "That is a beautiful way to describe repeated irresponsibility," I said. My mother gasped as if I had struck him. "Do not speak to your brother that way," my father barked, his palm slamming the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. "Then stop offering me up as payment for his mistakes." The words came out clean. Hard. Not loud, but final. That was the moment something shifted. I could see it in all three of them. Not agreement. Not remorse. Recognition. The realization that the old choreography had failed. They could not shame me back into position because I was no longer standing where they left me. My mother tried one last turn into the past. "We did so much for you, Natalie. We supported you. We believed in you." I reached into my bag again and pulled out the second folder. "You did help me once," I said. And I was grateful. Then I paid my own graduate tuition. Then I covered your property tax shortage 2 winters ago. Then I paid Mason's lease penalty on that failed food truck. Then I sent money for your roof repair that somehow became patio furniture and a new television. I opened the folder and spread the pages across the polished wood. Bank transfers. Payment confirmations. Old messages. Notes attached to transactions. Temporary. Emergency. Just this once. Family. At what dollar amount do I stop being your daughter and become your reimbursement plan? No one answered. Mason folded his arms, but the anger in him had thinned into something uglier and smaller. My mother stared at the paperwork like it might rearrange itself if she looked long enough. My father did not touch a single page. And then, from the hallway, a voice cut through the silence. I hope I am not interrupting the annual guilt festival. Aunt Carol stepped into the room carrying a casserole dish and the kind of expression people wear when they are done pretending confusion. She set the dish down without waiting to be invited. Actually, she said, looking from my parents to Mason, I think Natalie deserves witnesses. No one stopped her. That was when I knew the room had changed for good. Truth had moved out of private and into public. And once that happens, family myths do not disappear gracefully. They crack. Then they bleed. Aunt Carol had barely set the casserole dish down before the room changed shape around her. It was subtle at first. My father straightened, as if an audience might restore his authority. My mother dabbed at her eyes and tried to gather herself into the image of a wounded matriarch. Mason dropped back into his chair, arms folded tight across his chest, the pose of a man trying to look wronged when the truth had already climbed onto the table in front of him. I did not sit. I stood at the head of the dining table with the paperwork spread beneath the candlelight, every bank transfer and forged line staring back at us like a row of witnesses no one could intimidate. My father cleared his throat. We are not turning this into a spectacle. You already did, I said. You turned it into one the moment you threatened me, posted about me, and expected me to pay for something I never agreed to. My mother's mouth trembled. Natalie, please. We all made mistakes. No, I said quietly. Mason made choices. You both protected them. And I paid for all of it. The silence after that felt enormous. Mason let out a brittle laugh that did not sound anything like confidence. You really love keeping score, huh? I looked at him. No. I learned to keep records because all of you kept rewriting the story. That landed. I saw it in my mother's face first. A sharp flicker. Shame, maybe. Or just the shock of hearing the family system described out loud by the person it had fed on for years. Then Mason made his final mistake. Fine, he snapped. Yes, I used your name. Everyone said you would pay anyway. That is how this family works. No one moved. There it was. Plain. Bare. Ugly. Not even dressed up as desperation anymore. Just entitlement speaking in its natural voice. I turned first to my father. Did you hear that? His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Then to my mother. Did you? Tears spilled down her face before she whispered the sentence that split something open in me and, strangely, freed it at the same time. We leaned on you because we knew you would survive it. I closed my eyes for one brief second. Not because it hurt. I had known it for years without language. It was because hearing it said aloud felt like watching a locked door finally swing open. They had not chosen me because I was loved more. They had chosen me because they believed I could absorb more damage. Mason was protected because he broke easily. I was used because I did not. When I opened my eyes again, I felt steadier than I ever had in that house. I do not want another apology, I said. I want terms. My father frowned. Terms, yes. Since this family has operated like I am some private emergency fund for years, we are going to be clear. I will not pay Mason's restaurant debt. I will not co-sign, guarantee, or cover a single obligation created without my written agreement. My name, my email, and my signature are not to be used anywhere, by anyone, for any reason. And if it happens again, I will not protect any of you from what follows. Mason scoffed, but there was fear under it now. You would really do that to your own family? I met his eyes. No. I would stop letting my family do this to me. That was the first time he looked away. My mother sank slowly into a chair, one hand pressed over her mouth. My father remained standing, but something in him had gone slack, as though all the force he usually mistook for leadership had finally run into a wall it could not move. Aunt Carol crossed her arms and leaned against the doorway. Good. She should have done this years ago. My father shot her a look, but even he knew the room no longer belonged to him. I took one breath and softened only where I chose to, not where guilt demanded it. I am not trying to destroy you, Mason, I said. I will help in ways that do not involve money. I will pay for 3 sessions with a financial counselor. I will help you rebuild your budget. I will spend one Saturday helping you look for a smaller kitchen space if you want to salvage the business honestly. But I am done financing chaos. The expression on his face told me everything. He looked more insulted by practical help than he ever had by refusal. Because help had never really been the point. Access was. My access. My labor. My money. My silence. No one argued after that. Not really. The fight had gone out of the room, replaced by something far less dramatic and much more permanent. Exposure. We still ate dinner, because families like mine will drag a shattered truth to the table and serve gravy beside it before they ever admit the holiday is dead. My mother barely touched her food. My father spoke in clipped, careful sentences. Mason pushed potatoes around his plate and stared at nothing. Aunt Carol asked for more green beans like a woman refusing to let hypocrisy spoil her appetite. And I sat there feeling something unexpected bloom beneath the wreckage. Not triumph. Relief. The aftermath was not cinematic. It was better. It was real. My mother stopped posting vague moral sermons online. My father stopped calling me with commands and started texting with stiff, awkward politeness. Mason lost the polished illusion he had built around himself and, within a month, took a smaller shared kitchen space he could actually afford. He never thanked me for the counselor referrals. He used one anyway. As for me, I moved into my townhouse in Seattle 3 weeks later. On the first night, I stood alone in the quiet living room with unopened boxes around me and winter light fading gold against the windows, and I understood something I should have learned years ago. The sweetest revenge is not watching people fall. It is stepping out from under the weight they taught you to carry and realizing you were never weak for saying yes. You were powerful the moment you learned to say no. If you have ever been the dependable one, the quiet one, the person everyone assumes will survive being used, then you already know how dangerous one calm refusal can be. It does not just change an argument. It redraws the whole map. And if this story felt a little too familiar, tell me where you would have drawn the line. Leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to Waters Payback for more stories about the moment silence ends and everything changes.